Hello, everyone. My name is Rebecca Morton. My pronouns are she, her. I am the artist and studio manager here at Baltimore Clayworks. We are thrilled that you all have joined us. I would like to acknowledge that I'm joining from my office located in Piscataway and Susquehannock land, currently known as Baltimore, Maryland. It is my pleasure to welcome you to our virtual artist talk given today by Stephanie Kim. She is a short-term resident here from March through April. And on April 29th, Stephanie will be teaching a workshop titled Cracking the Illustrated Surface from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. And for more information about our artist talks, please visit our virtual library at baltimoreclayworks.org. I will now turn it over to Stephanie.
Cool. So thank you everybody for coming to my talk. I'm just gonna go over my background and kind of share kind of how I go about making my work and kind of what my ceramic life plans are. So a quick bio. I grew up in Southern California in a suburb called Rancho Cucamonga. And I studied computer science at UC Berkeley for 4 years for my undergrad. And then after that, I moved to San Francisco, right across the bay, and I worked as a software engineer for 6 years. So I worked at Yelp for 3 years, and I just hit like 3 years working at Google, and I work in Chrome. So I think the beginning really of my art stuff is just my childhood. I was always kind of like an artsy kid. I loved to draw and stuff like that. So I took lots of art classes and I really got into it more like in high school. Not really in a high school class, but like a separate after school class on the weekends. And I had this instructor who was really into like making sure her students had like a strong foundation in 2D drawing and painting. So shading, rendering, figure drawing, really everything that you'd expect to kind of, I guess, see at like an art 101 kind of class of like how to draw was definitely her strong point. And this is where I really fell in love with like drawing with graphite, color pencils and charcoals. And so in the next few slides, I'm going to go over some of my portfolio because I think there is a pretty good connection from that old work that I had 10 years ago to the work I make now. So this is 2012, 10 years ago. So I was probably like 17-ish at the time. It's kind of like an abstract, weird thing. I really wanted to show off like my shading skills with graphite pencils. And this is in color pencil. I still have the same set of Prismacolor color pencils, so those things last forever, but I still use them and they're really fun to use. And I also did some watercolor and acrylic. Those were never really my strong suits. I just never really like got into it. I felt like watercolor was a little too hard to control. Like it was hard to get like a nice crisp line that you would get with like ink or like just pencil. And I did some acrylic. It was kind of like a weird take on a self-portrait. But really my heart was fully into like these dry mediums of pencil and charcoal. So I like to do a lot of abstract, weird environment kind of things. So this is kind of like what I was doing as a 17-year-old. So fast forward 6 years, it's 2018. I think I was working at Yelp as an engineer about 2 years. And then like most people find out, it's really hard to make friends as an adult. And I was like, I really want something to do outside of work that's just not drinking with my coworkers. And I've always wanted to take a pottery class. So I signed up for my first one. So on the left, you can see those are like my first pots that I was finally making. And I remember I was just so captivated by how difficult throwing is. I think my first class, I didn't make anything, like I just couldn't get anything centered. And it was so upsetting because people next to me were like making something and I like wanted to cry because I think by then I really thought that like my drawing skills would somehow translate to like working on the wheel, which like it had no connection whatsoever. And then so for like the next few months, it was just every weekend I would just spend my time in the studio and open hours, just trying to figure out how to center. And then eventually I got to a point where, you know, I was just taking more and more classes, like more advanced wheel throwing classes. So that's me as a little baby 24-year-old being really proud of my bowl. I think I still have that one. And over here, I think that's one of my first underglazed drawings on a piece of functional ceramic ware. And then pretty much for the next 4 or 5 years, I stayed in SF, obviously, and I kept continuing with this like pottery ceramics hobby that I had. And I was just really captivated by how difficult throwing is. And so my primary goal for those years was just to get like as good as I can be with throwing. Like, you know, on Instagram, you see these like master potters doing these crazy things. And I was just like, I want to do that. Like, I feel like I can do it if I just try really hard. So you can see here that these are sectional pieces that I attached together to make these bigger, large forms. And I was always really proud of it. I think it's always fun to be proud of your work at the end. So I would always like make my friends take pictures of me with it. And this is another like throwing large class I took where I was throwing like a large bowl / platter thing. Yeah, I feel like I have a lot of love for like throwing and pottery because it was kind of like what brought me into this ceramic art world. And so this is kind of a before and after. So 2018 is like when I started. You can tell I'm a lot younger there. So, you know, I was like still back then, this is like a video that I had from a long time ago. I was like struggling to pull up walls. And then, you know, like 4 years later, I'm like working on like bigger things like this. So I feel like I think it's nice to step back and see how much you've grown. And like, again, it was so hard. So I like to see it and then, you know, give myself like a little pat on the back, you know, to be like, yeah, that was really hard to do. And I figured it out eventually. So it's nice. And then, so once I started to get into the hang of like throwing and stuff, I started to do these pet portrait commissions. That's when I really started to use a lot of underglazed pencil. And hold on, oops. And so this video is a time lapse of my drawing. Does everybody see that? Okay, so this is just a time lapse of what it looked like. I would start with pencil and I would start from left to right. So I'm just filling in all this pug's face, just shading as I go. And I did a lot of these pet mugs and I had a lot of fun with recording these time lapses. I think they would take like 30 minutes to an hour to do each. Let's go back. And another one. Okay, and then so basically for like a year or so, I did so many pet mugs and I kind of burnt myself out. So on my website, I kind of put up all of them and you can kind of tell like how many I did. And it was actually really rewarding. Like I would actually get lots of requests for like pets that passed away or like just gifts for like friends and family. So it was always really nice to make these commissions that were really, really meaningful to people. But eventually I did get sick of it. I wanted to work on different forms and just draw different things. And I kind of stepped back and thought about how, you know, in high school, I did lots of figure drawing and I want to do more of that again. So basically I just traded in the dogs for my face. Really, I only drew my face because that's like what I had access to. Like I wanted to focus on different angles, different expressions. And it's really handy to have like your own face. And I would just take a selfie and really play with what I wanted to draw. So this picture on the left kind of shows like a progression of drawing on this bisque ware. And then that's it fired with the clear glaze. And these both have no glaze on them. And at this point, I was, you know, taking class and I wanted to kind of focus on what my artwork was to me. Like, I love how we would look at some other people's mugs or their forms and you're like, oh yeah, that's so-and-so's thing. Like they just had that specific, like, of course, that's their kind of style. And so I was thinking about that and I realized that like a lot of other things in my life, I would always fixate on getting something really, really perfect. And I think I realized that I was doing that with my work. So then I was kind of sketching around in my sketchbook and I kind of had this moment. I was like, well, what if I just erase it. Just this idea of spending a lot of time trying to get like so tedious and getting it the shading perfect, and then just being so reckless and just erasing it was really enticing. So I did that, and I loved how the smearing kind of came down, and it really shows like the direction of where I was erasing these parts of graphite. And I was like, well, if it works with pencil, I think it should work with underglaze pencil. And it did for the most part. It wasn't like as smeary as a graphite pencil, but I did this. And I think some of you might remember seeing this at NCECA in Sacramento last year. And so this is two sides of a form. And so the left side, it's erased downwards, and the right side is erased upwards. So because of that, I think that was kind of like the beginnings of like what I want to make, and kind of the beginnings of an artist statement. And so just working with starting from that piece of smearing these drawings and making it less perfect, I started to like think like, how can I depict like emotion and trauma in my work? I kind of wanted to like mirror like what I was feeling into my work. Kind of like how, I don't know if anyone else does this, but like I like to journal a lot, especially when I'm like feeling upset or I have a crush on someone. And it's just like, you would never want anyone to read that because it's like so embarrassing, but it's also so detailed and so private to you. And I was wondering like, how can I like recreate that feeling of like, this is like very like intimate and just emotion and raw into my work. And I felt that I could do that with like these 2D surface drawings. And also, so I like under pencil drawings, obviously, and I think it adds a lot of personal touch. But basically, it's just like I'm just making a 3D canvas. So then I start to think more about like, well, can I use some other mediums? And I'm going back to like my high school days of like color pencil and watercolor. So that's kind of when the wheel started turning. Yeah, and then so this is kind of a different phase now of my life where like I'm just really doing residencies. So I did one, my first residency was at Missoula in August 2022, just for a month. And then so right now I'm in Baltimore, and then my upcoming one is in Air Valoris. It's the south of France, and that's going to be this summer. So I'm super excited about that. And so this is me in Missoula. This is my little private studio that I had. And this is like this big random sculpture that I made. And I got really into coil building for the first time. Like I just never tried it before. And I was like, I'll try it. Like I've seen videos of it and it was pretty hard, but I really enjoyed it. And I like didn't really throw that much besides some mugs. And this is like their little backyard area. And I really had the most amazing time, mostly because I just didn't work for an entire month. So it was just every day was just going to the studio or like just doing whatever I wanted. And so it was nice to see and like live as like a real artist, just making work and like not having like my real life engineering job. And this is like my work that I finished at Missoula. So this was also coil built. And I have these patches kind of like just placed on, and you can really tell that it's kind of like torn and ripped and like where these patches are. And it really was like a serendipitous moment. I didn't really plan it, but it was more like, I think my coil building skills were like not very good and I needed to fix a spot. And I was like, oh, let me just like throw on a little patch. And then I saw it and I was like, oh, like that's actually really cool. Like I wanted to show kind of the underneath of like what a person is like, you know, from the top, it's like what we see, you know, it could just be like very superficial and just like what you see, but then underneath is like all of these different things. So I kind of show that literally with like skulls, but also I also play with kind of that runny, drippy look from like that eraser strokes. And this is where I also played with Celadon glaze, like and underglaze paint, like with my work. And kind of continuing on that same topic of like patches, I wanted to really dive like more deeply into like what it means. I think with like healing, it's kind of a complicated topic where we think like we're getting better, and then we like maybe like when we see like, oh, it's getting better, I was kind of picturing like colorful, beautiful flowers and stuff like that. But then it's like yeah, like you're better, but like, are you really? It's like never like a clear answer. And so it kind of makes you wonder, like are like my issues healed, just like this kind of introspection of like who I am and like where I am in like my own like trauma and healing stages. So I think with like these drips coming from these flowers and these swirls and these flowers up here, I think that's kind of a nod towards like, yeah, it's pretty, but like it's kind of like not like a fully healthy, lively pretty. It's like there's something a little wrong with it. And then a cue quarter life crisis. So I finished up like my 1 month in Montana, and it was like the most amazing thing. So this is where I stayed. This is Rattlesnake Creek, and this building is like where my apartment was. And so like every morning I would wake up and I would just open my patio door and I would just eat breakfast outside, listening to like the creek. And like in the middle of the day, I would just like walk through the creek and like step my feet in and stuff. And then that's when I realized I was like so happy. And I think it really made me question like, what am I doing with my life? Like most of us think that. But really it was like, what am I doing like with my job? And like, do I really want to work this much? And I wasn't even working that much. It was like a normal 9 to 5 job, but it felt too much. And my body was really telling me that like it was happier in Montana. Like, I mean, it was also very sunny. It's not really usually this sunny and beautiful there. But it was really strange because I had no more sleeping issues because I wasn't stressed anymore. And then also like my skin issues went away, like my eczema went away. It was very bizarre. But it kind of like woke me up and was like, no, I should like really do something with art, even if it's like, I don't know what I'm doing, but I know that it makes me happy and then it makes like my body happy to just do more of art. So then I decided to kind of shift my priorities. So I used to work full time at Google, and then they're really supportive with kind of giving a flexible schedule. So now I do 60% part time. I work 3 days a week, and the rest of the time is like ceramics residencies, and also just having a day off to just rest. So then once I came back, I was doing more work at home. And so this is like my at home surface design studio. Really, it's just I have this lift top coffee table and I put all of my work there. And then I just sit on the couch for hours and watch a lot of TV while I work on my stuff. I think that's really where I spend most of my time, all this like surface stuff, because it is pretty tedious, but I really, really enjoy just like drawing something so tedious while like having some trashy show on the background. And so this is more recent work. The kind of continuation of like this patched series. These are like 2 large pieces stacked on top of each other. And this is a little detail. So it's very similar to the other piece with like the woman sitting with the orange flowers. And I really had fun with, I had flowers on the bottom and then I did fruit at the top. I didn't think I really had like a strong, deep meaning behind this. I just kind of wanted to continue the series, but also really wanted to play with like this shading and this meticulous like drawing skills. And then more recent work. So this is more recent, kind of before I went to Montana. Kind of this image of this woman trapped inside this form. And I kind of continued it with color pencil. Kind of in that same theme of like being trapped, but also kind of pressed against the form. And this is the first time I did lots of like kind of traditional 2D mediums. So I did color pencil, some acrylic, some charcoal. So I really had fun with that one. And sorry, I'm almost done here. So mugs. Kind of to end on a fun note, mugs, they're just fun. Like I wish I had like a stronger deep meaning behind my mug work, but I don't. Like they're just fun. And I think that's why I think ceramics will always be like my favorite type of artwork, just because we're able to make like functional work that you can drink coffee out of. So this is like an evolution of my mugs. So first I started with these pet portraits. I kind of diving more into like figurative. And I also got really into drawing like feet and fingers because they're just so interesting and fun to draw. And I also got more into drawing hair, which I found really fun. And then I came back to this animal kind of thing and just drew more like cutesy, fun animal things, but also I loved where I can have like drops of glaze. So, when someone's drinking out of it, you kind of feel the glaze bumps, and you could really feel that on the octopus. And this is where I also got into reduction firing. I felt that the reduction, it just gives us such a nice toasty look. And at cone 10, these are all like cone 5, 6. At cone 10, the underglaze pencil gets a little darker, and it has like a slight sheen to it, which I really liked. And so those are my mugs. And this is my current explorations here at Baltimore. You can see I'm really like playing with like the interior of the mugs. For here, I threw the forms and I actually pressed in coils, kind of smearing it down into kind of what it would look like if it was like coil built. It's really exploring these handles and kind of these flowery loops. And some different methods I'm testing, kind of spraying water onto a drawn underglaze pencil drawing to make it smear, but also kind of simulating that same thing, but with regular underglaze paint on top of glaze. So these haven't been fired yet, but we'll see how that turns out. And yeah, that's it. Thank you everybody for coming. I don't know, I think Rebecca already mentioned this. So I am doing a workshop at April 29th. We'll go over like everything, like how to draw with underglaze pencil, and also just kind of tips and tricks of how to like make it work well with your forms. And you can find me at Steph-Ceramics. That's my Instagram, and StephanieMakeStuff.com is my website. Yeah, that's it. Thank you.